Welcome to the Sociology Tutor. My name's Tom, and today we're going to be looking at what is a Marxist view of religion. So I'm going to begin with a brief overview of what Marx believed about society. Then I'm going to look at 3 easy to use points that you can get into your answers. How does Marx interpret religion in society? And then we're going to look at 5 or 6 evaluations. At the very end, I'm going to explain how I would answer a question on this topic. So let's get started. Remember, a Marxist theory of society is a structural theory. Now remember, a structural theory argues that people are strongly shaped by the social structure, by the institutions in society, and people don't have a huge amount of free will. Our ideas, the norms, values, etc. that we have, we internalize through education, family, the media and religion, and they strongly shape our behaviour. So structural theorists take a top-down approach to society. They start off by thinking about what is the social structure in society, how do the institutions socialise people into it, and then how do people behave from that. So for Marx, all societies are based on class conflict. There will always be 2 groups. One group which owns the means of production. The means of production are the ways of creating wealth in society, the resources, for example, land. And then there will be a second group who are labourers. Now the labourers, the workers, are people who don't own any way of creating wealth. They don't own any land, a business, etc. And therefore they have to work for the people that do own the means of production. Now Marx said this relationship is exploitative, that the workers, the labourers, are exploited by the group that own the means of production. So in the society that Marx was writing about and we're thinking about, which we live in today, a capitalist society, the business owners are known as the bourgeoisie. The business owners are the bourgeoisie and the workers are the proletariat. So if you're a business owner, if you're someone who owns, a chain of shops, clearly you're not going to work in all those shops. You're going to have people working for you. And those people might be earning the minimum wage. They're not receiving a huge amount of money back for their work, whilst you might be becoming very profitable as the business owner. Marx said this is exploitative. So from a Marxist perspective, the people that own the means of production, the bourgeoisie, the business owners in a capitalist society, they are the ruling class and they control the institutions in society. So family, education, media, religion, the ideas that are spread, the ideas we're socialised into by those institutions are the ideas that are going to support the ruling class and support the type of society we've got. So in today's society, a capitalist society, where you've got the business owners, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, the idea is going to be ones which suggest that we have to have a small group of people who are very wealthy and a significant number of people in society who either live in extreme poverty or who are exploited, who don't earn much money for their labour. Now the reason I keep talking about exploitation so much is because it's key to the role of religion and other institutions. They help justify, another word for that is legitimise, the exploitation and class inequality in society. So it's a really key idea, this idea that workers are exploited, so they don't receive a fair wage, a fair salary for the work that they do. Now, interestingly about capitalism, Marx said that in a capitalist society, the conditions would get so extreme that exploitation would become so bad that actually capitalism was creating the seeds of its own revolution, that the workers would be so exploited, they would realise the true oppression that they're experiencing is coming from the class inequality. They would become aware of their class position, and then they would rise up. There would be a revolution and we would move into a classless society, which Marx called communism. So we would live in a communist society where there wouldn't be a range of different classes, the bourgeoisie, the business owners and the proletariat. We would have a classless society. Before I get into the main ideas, remember to leave a comment if there's something you don't understand or there's topics you would like to see videos on. Also subscribe to the channel because I'm going to be posting a huge amount of content throughout the year, all of which is going to boost your grade, help you get those top grades. So what did Marx say about religion? He said religion is ideological apparatus. What he means by this is it is a way of spreading ideas, norms, values in society which maintain the position of the ruling class, who are the bourgeoisie, the business owners. So it spreads ideas that support capitalism, that justify capitalism, that tell the workers that their position is acceptable. So religion is ideological apparatus, and it means it's a way in which ideas are spread in society which support the ruling class. Now remember, all institutions do this. They spread ideas from a Marxist perspective that are the ideas of the ruling class, that support class inequality or justify class inequality and justify capitalism. There are three ways in which religion is ideological apparatus. Now the first way is that religion justifies class inequality. Now the word for this is it legitimizes it. If you legitimize something, it means you justify it. Religion does this by telling people that the position they're born into, particularly into their poor position, is something which has been put there by God. So if we go back to the feudal era in Britain, people believed that the king or the queen had been put there by God, the divine right of kings, and that everyone else in their position, it had been chosen by God. Now, of course, if you believe that and you're worried about going to heaven or hell, then you're going to accept that position, and you're clearly not going to try and rebel, you're not going to organise because you believe it's ordained by God. If we go to the 17th and 18th century, people believed that being rich or poor again was a sign of God's favouring them in some way. So they reflected on it in religious terms rather than thinking about the fact that there was a group of people in society who were exploiting the workers. So religion justifies class inequality by saying there is a way in which this has been chosen by God. The second way in which religion is ideological apparatus is that it keeps workers passive. What we mean by that is it stops them from organising and rebelling by teaching them that in some way that their position, the poverty they live in, the exploitation they're feeling as a member of, the poorest groups in society, is in some way virtuous, it's holy, it's put there by God. So if we think about Christianity, there are many stories in the Bible of Jesus socialising with and spending his time with the poor. Now these ideas would obviously be spread in church, and in some way, from a Marxist perspective, it tells the workers that their position is virtuous, it's holy, and by quietly accepting their position, they're more likely to get into heaven quickly, and in fact they're more likely to get to heaven than a rich person. So this quote perfectly illustrates that. You can see it is suggesting that the rich person is going to have a harder time getting into heaven. So what we can see is that religion is used to keep the workers passive. It teaches them that their position is virtuous, it's holy, that being poor is in some way favoured by God, and therefore they don't rebel, they don't organise against the people who own the ways of creating wealth in society. What this creates is something called false consciousness. Now, false consciousness is a mental state where the workers don't realise their true exploitation. They don't realise that the true cause of their exploitation is the business owners, the bourgeoisie, and the fact that they are exploited at work. So false consciousness is a bit like you're being brainwashed. You're not clear about your position in society. And of course the workers are the majority in society. If they organised, in theory, they could overthrow the bourgeoisie, the business owners, who are a smaller group. But false consciousness prevents them from doing that, and religion plays a key role. It keeps them brainwashed, it hides from them the fact that they are actually exploited by the bourgeoisie, the business owners. Now Lenin, who was a Marxist thinker, he adopted Marxist ideas, he described religion as spiritual gin. Gin is of course alcohol, and it's a way of keeping people drunk. They're in what he described as a mystical fog. They're not aware of their true exploitation, so they don't do anything about it. They don't rebel, they don't organise, they are kept in a state of false consciousness. So for Lenin, religion is spiritual gin. It keeps people in this mystical fog where they cannot be aware of their true exploitation. Now, the final way in which religion is ideological apparatus is that it disguises people from their true exploitation. So Marx highlighted that work in a capitalist society is alienating. Now, what he means by this is that people don't feel their personality, their creativity is being expressed at work. So they feel separate from their work. And this is for a couple of reasons. The first reason is they don't own the means of production. So they feel disconnected. They're going to work for somebody else. And they also have no control over the process. So if you're working in a factory, you're obviously told where to go, how to perform a job. And the likelihood is you're performing one very simple task over and over again. So there's no real creativity in it. Now, Marx said this experience is alienation. You don't feel that your work is expressing who you are as a human. You don't feel your work is expressing your creativity or your identity. If we contrast that with, for example, a blacksmith. If you're a blacksmith and you own your forge, which is where blacksmiths work, and you're creating all sorts of metal items for people, at the end of the day you could look at your work and think, well, I've achieved this, I've created these items, this reflects my personality, my identity. If we contrast that with working on a factory line where you might be doing, as we said, this one simple job over and over again, you've got no control over the process and you don't own the means of production, then you're going to feel alienated. So alienation is feeling separate from your work for the reasons I've said. Now, Marx says what religion does is hide that experience from people, and he described religion as it is a drug. It dulls people's pain. So opium is what you make heroin from, and heroin takes people's pain away. And what he's saying is religion dulls the pain of alienation and exploitation. So it disguises the true experience of work, the true experience of exploitation. But it doesn't take it fully away, because it can't do that, because it doesn't change the exploitation. It doesn't change the conditions of work, the alienation. All it does is dull the pain. So it's like a pain reliever, but it doesn't actually resolve the problem. So that's the final way in which religion is ideological apparatus. It's disguising people from their true experience. Okay, almost there. Well done for listening. We're now going to go through the evaluations. Remember, at the end of the video, there are going to be links to a feminist view of religion and also a functionist view of religion. So if you're talking about or answering a question on any of those topics, you need to bring in the other theories to counter-argue, to evaluate. So once you've finished, head over there. Now, what are the negative evaluations? What are the criticisms that we can make of a Marxist view of religion? So there are four. Now, the first one is that we now live in a secular society in Britain. So religion and religious influence has declined significantly from when Marx was writing. And this is also the case in Europe and slowly becoming the case in America too. So if we live in a secular society, how can religion be ideological apparatus? So how can religion be used to spread the ideas of the ruling class, the bourgeoisie, the business owners? It's not possible, because most of us don't go to church, and therefore it's hard to see how religion could be a way in which it justifies class inequality, capitalism, and prevents a revolution. So that's our first big criticism. The second one is that Marx doesn't look at any of the positive benefits of religion. So for example, religion does help people in traumatic moments, in times of uncertainty. And Marx ignores that. He doesn't recognise that there may be a need for that, a function that religion performs for people in society, for example, around bereavements, funerals, deaths, etc. So Marx ignores the positive benefits. Thirdly, Marx said religion would only exist in class-divided societies because it's only needed to justify class inequality, and that religion would just disappear in a classless society. Now, from 1917 to the 1990s, in the Soviet Union, religion was abolished, so it was banned. But there was still a demand for religion, and when the Soviet Union ended, religion began to grow again. So in theory, in a communist society, in a classless society, which in theory the Soviet Union was, the USSR, religion should have completely declined, but it didn't. There were still seeds of religion, people still practiced religion in private, and it then grew after communism had ended. The final criticism you can make is that religion has been a source for hope. It's been a way in which working class groups, oppressed groups, have challenged the status quo, the existing social structures in society. Now, neo-Marxists are Marxists who have revised Marxist thinking, and they argue that religion has, a dual character, that it can be a source of oppression, but equally it can also be a source for hope, and it can teach people that there is a better world which is possible. There's an ideal world which they can aspire to, and they can use religion as a way to motivate themselves to challenge the inequality, the exploitation they may be experiencing. A positive evaluation of Marxism is that the people who are most likely to be religious in today's society are poor people, and that's true around the world. So it may be the case, and from a Marxist perspective they would argue this, that people who are poor are more likely to be religious, remember, because religion takes away some of the pain of exploitation. It dulls the pain. Remember, Marx said religion is the opium of the masses. So there's some evidence that we could use it from a Marxist perspective. People who are living in poverty are more likely to be religious because it dulls the pain, it takes away the pain of exploitation. A second evaluation we can make of it is that if we take the Church of England, for example, the religious leaders in the Church of England are very, very likely, the majority of them are privately educated and they go to elite universities. So the background of the leaders of the churches, of the Church of England, is very, very elite, and some argue that has taken them away from having a radical message, that they're not going to have a radical message because they are effectively from a background of the ruling class, the bourgeoisie. The final point we can make is the Protestant Christian right, the fundamentalist Christian right in America, has promoted ideas again that the experience of poverty is in some way an indication of a lack of holiness, a lack of favour by God, and that in some way if you're poor and you're struggling, you're being exploited, it's because you're not holy enough, that you're not chosen by God. So again, it's pushing forward these ideas that in some way poverty is a decision or has been influenced by God, which is again a way in which we can see it legitimizes and justifies class inequality. So if I was answering a question on this topic, I would be quite balanced in my evaluations of it, because historically it's impossible to argue that religion hasn't been used to legitimize and justify class inequality. Some of the ideas that certainly have come out of Christianity in terms of the poor being virtuous, that people are put into their positions in some way by God, and you can see this in some hymns and some of the ideas and the teachings in Christianity, or certainly the way they've been expressed. And we can see this in many religions. So for example, the root out of suffering in Buddhism is to focus on one's internal spiritual life. It isn't to organise and to rebel and to consider the inequalities in society. It's to focus on one's ethical, spiritual life, meditation, etc. However, how relevant is Marxism today? Certainly in Europe and America, as we said, that those countries are secularizing. So can religion really be an influence in terms of ideological apparatus. We can't really say it is if so few people actually ever absorb or are exposed to religious ideas. So historically it's certainly been the case that it did this, and around the world today there will be similar ideas being promoted. So in the poorest parts of the world, religion is most popular. So what I'd recommend you do now is, as I said, listen to the episode on a feminist view of religion and a functionist view of religion, and that will complete your package of the theories of religion, and then you'll be able to answer questions on this topic. There'll be links to those videos at the end of this video. So well done for listening. Let me know if there's anything you don't understand in the comments. Take care.